Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, we are super excited to welcome Jake Sorofman to the podcast. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you, Kelly. Good to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Jake Sorofman is the Chief Marketing Officer at Visier. Before Visier, he was with multiple SaaS companies, different sizes, startups to enterprise. He's been president of MetaCX, CMO of Pendo, Chief of Research at Gartner, where he advised, published on CMO and customer experience topics. So he's got lots to offer this conversation and our listeners today. So we're super excited to have him today to talk about phases of growth from marketing acceptance through scalable revenue. So here we go. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your story. Give us a quick background as to how we got to this conversation today and where you came from.
Yeah, gee, where should I start? It's a long and sordid tale. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, I guess. And I started in PR. So I worked for PR agencies back in the day. And that's where I really got my first exposure to the world of venture-backed software companies and got hooked on that pretty early, and then went through a series of different roles, from running in-house PR for a company called Ironside. This is Bubble 1.0, like 1999, 2000. Grew very fast, filed to go public, and then wound it down and sold it for scrap. Like, it was just that whole crazy ride. If you were around during those times, it was a wild time. And that was my first exposure to what startups felt like and what that whole experience was. And then went through a number of different roles: product marketing, communications, broader, a VP of marketing and CMO roles, and then took the 5-year hiatus at Gartner, which was amazing. And I know you and I have some similar background there. We didn't overlap temporally, but we know some people in common and have similar affection for that company. And then came back to my roots on the operating side and ran marketing at Pendo, which grew incredibly fast. That was I guess they call it a triple, double. You get to 2 million in revenue, and then you triple twice and double 3 times. And that's the 5-year path to 100 million. And that's exactly what that company did. So a wild ride, very intense, learned a ton, very proud of that. And here I am today doing another scale up. We're a company in the people analytics space. So we're the market share leader in a category called people analytics, which is really just about applying data science and artificial intelligence to understand your employees more effectively, to make better decisions about how you hire, how you promote, how you progress, how you pay, retaining people more effectively, driving more productivity. And it's a great company, and it's been a really fun ride.
Awesome. So you've been a lot of different size companies.
Yes.
I read somewhere that you've been a senior leader in like 6 different software startups, raised over $1 billion. And when I think about Gartner, right, because we both have that experience, as you mentioned, like that is a established, well-run, highly efficient machine that runs, it hits its numbers, it's predictable quarter after quarter after quarter. Totally different than the startup world and all these places that you've worked at. What do you see as kind of the big differences in marketing at mature, established company? And again, different role. You called it a hiatus. I thought that was an interesting term, but definitely kind of more of that Gartner for marketers, kind of more advisory side, right?
Yeah.
As compared to running marketing in an operating role. But how does that look? What's your biggest learnings on kind of the differences of marketing at different size companies at different stages?
Yeah, I love that question. So, and because I'm kind of experiencing that now as we achieve, we're running at scale, we're a decent size organization, growing moderately, and the market has changed, right? So the market would reward growth at any cost, and now the market rewards efficient growth. And I think Gartner is a great counterpoint as an example of a very operationally efficient company, a company that really understands they understand what the levers are that create value in that company, and they optimize for them. So very data-driven, very operationally rigorous, and wired to perform as a public company and as a revenue machine, right? So the difference is going from creating something out of nothing. So creating something of significance in the world out of whole cloth, which is very much the startup thing. It's very much my roots, is like, how do we imagine the art of the possible and create meaning around something that hasn't existed before? That's probably my DNA more than anything. To going through the stage of where you have to start becoming a predictable revenue machine and an efficient growth machine. And those are very different skill sets and very different modes of thinking. The challenge is ensuring that it's accretive and you're not sacrificing the magic through every stage of that evolution. That's important for me personally, because it is that early stage stuff of creating something out of nothing, creating meaning in the world where it hasn't existed, that keeps me energized and inspired. Yeah, the different skill sets and orientations. And, it's necessary that, and I think that this is actually one of my personal strengths, is self-awareness. Like, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not particularly good at. And I'm pretty good at hiring to fill those gaps. So having the right team around you to ensure that you're able to be the company that you need to be at different phases of growth. Another element of this is, particularly when you're growing at hypergrowth, like Pendo was, is the company is a different company every quarter. So you're constantly investing ahead of where you are, and you have to kind of imagine the process, the infrastructure, the people that you're going to have in place when you turn the corner. So you're always recruiting and always feeling like you're getting a little ahead of your skis, like investing in things that feel like they don't really fit the moment, because the moment is like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I have so many questions in there. So you were talking about the being energized by the kind of smaller and the startup and the growing and all of that. I think I'm self-aware. I'm very self-aware of the fact that I'm terrible at startups. Like I don't know if I was terrible, but I had to learn it. I was an enterprise guy forever, and I was really, really successful in an enterprise segment, but I didn't love myself in that environment, because I felt like I was like, am I marketing by PowerPoint? Like, am I actually doing marketing, or am I just building slides about marketing? And I felt like that's what I was doing a lot in the enterprise. The startup world, like, requires a lot of just scrappy, roll up your sleeves, get dirty. And I love that stuff. It wasn't a natural pivot for me off of enterprise. And so I had to kind of like learn what that was and realize that, like, I know now what I need to do in this role. I was able to do that, but I also didn't love it.
Didn't love it.
Yeah. Because I was like, I don't know that I'm like, I know now what it means to be a startup CMO, but I don't know that I want to continue to be a startup CMO. And so I sort of ended up in this place in between now with Demandbase, which is a well-established company, but still private, still pre-IPO. And it's this nice balance. And I'm like, okay, this is maybe the sweet spot of where I love being. It's not, I'm doing real marketing, hands-on, touching things every day, but not like still trying to find paper for the printer. Like, I feel like there's somewhere in between. And so it's really interesting to hear. I think people are motivated and inspired by all different stages. And so I love hearing that. One of the things you mentioned was about the different quarter, like different company every quarter, in a high growth. And I love that. One of those challenges I see from my experiences in sort of these high growth companies is the people aren't always empowered to kind of come along for the ride. I mean, they just don't, like that, the mindset you talked about, hiring people to fill gaps and things, which I think makes sense. How do you recognize a disposition that can handle change that fast? Like, I love change. I embrace it. Every day it's new. I love it. Some people hate change and they like sort of like fight it and sink in their heels. How do you find talent that has the appetite for that?
Yeah, I mean, resilience and growth mindset are so important. So finding people that like you, and I'm the same way, like I get excited about change, maybe to a fault.
Me too.
Because in my experience, behind every door is a new opportunity to learn and make new connections, whether it's human connections or just conceptual connections. There's some inspiration behind that door, and I get excited about it. I get a little stale and a little bored in a steady state operating environment where there isn't a whole lot of change. And similar to you, I think I'm the type of person, I'm not interested in pre-product market fit early stage companies anymore. I'm also not interested in running an efficient operating machine. I'm somewhere between. It's kind of building and fixing, where there's some iteration through the unknown to find those things that are going to create the accelerants for growth. And that can happen at scale as well. So if they don't have that, they don't fit. And there's something around ego that I think is really important to reconcile. There needs to be some ego, right? People need to have confidence and belief and conviction. But if they're ego driven, like they have fragile egos, that becomes very, very difficult in that environment, because you need different leaders and different roles at different points in time. So the idea of getting layered, or narrowing responsibility, as companies scale, they necessarily need to narrow responsibilities, specialize in certain areas, which means that the CMO of the earliest stage company may not be the CMO of the later stage company. If you want to be around for the ride, you have to recognize that maybe your role is going to be narrower. And that requires some durability of ego.
Yeah, we used to call that to share Legos, right? If you've read those articles about that idea that as a company grows, scope gets narrowed because the job is bigger at a smaller scope. And that's just kind of that growth rate. And I think it's hard. I'm learning real time. And I take for granted when I'm in conversations, and maybe I need to kind of think about my audience more, but I take for granted that everyone in the room has a company first mindset. And so thinking we can have kind of very open, honest, transparent conversations about what does it take to make this company successful, but realize sometimes I have people in the room who immediately sort of like put on their sort of like preservation vest on either their job or their scope. Instead of thinking like, yes, that's best for the company, I can find myself a place. Like I can jump on board in this other area, or this role I have right now may not make sense, but as we grow, I can transform. But I don't hear that. Instead, what I feel like I often see in those high changes is the sort of buckle up and stick in your heels, be like, but this is my job and I feel threatened. And you're like, no, we're talking about what's best for the company. We're not threatening jobs. And anyway, I may have gotten a little nuance there, but
no, I'm with you. No, I completely relate to what you're saying. And it's that the paradox is that what you described, where they think they protect themselves, is actually the most vulnerable place to be.
Yeah. Because it sort of like puts a very clear wrapper around what they are willing to do or what they can do. And that role may not be relevant anymore.
100%.
So yeah, putting our big boy business hats on sometimes is tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get it. I mean, the world's an uncertain place and everyone has different circumstances, but I think fear is debilitating.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me this, you've been a CMO a few times. You've worked or marketing leader. You've worked in these startups, I assume for various founders.
Yeah.
For context, my next book will be called I'll Never, Ever, Ever Work for a Founder Again. So that's where I'm coming from in 7 words or less. But I'd love to hear what your experience has been as a marketing leader in working for a founder who most often equates their brand with the company brand. And it's a really, really interesting set of handcuffs. I'd love to hear your experience there.
Tricky. Founders are tricky.
Mm-hmm.
I love them and hate them. I do like working for founders. And what I like is deep belief and conviction, passion, connection to a mission. They also have often things I don't have, like the willingness to take that ultimate risk, to build a company on the basis of just belief, on the back of credit cards and home equity, whatever it takes. Like, I'm not that guy. And I respect, admire, and envy that sort of thing. Anyone that believes deeply, I have a lot of admiration for. So, but there's a mutation to it. And that's the part that I think you're speaking to, and it can get really funky when people start believing so deeply that they can't see things objectively and recognize the distinction between themselves and the company they're building.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That is the challenge I see. But I love your point about the belief. That was the best part. Yeah, like my last founder I worked for, he believed so wholeheartedly in the mission. And his vision was not a month out. His vision was 3 years out. Like, he had big, big dreams and really leaned on us to kind of, to bring that dream to life. But you never questioned where we were going because the founders are very vocal about that. Whereas, an operating CEO sometimes can have, more of kind of a quarterly mindset or kind of a transactional. So there is definitely a passion, and you get people excited to kind of follow in that mission. So, so you're right. That is absolutely the best part.
Yeah. And, it's an interesting, you're making me think about where I fit, because I guess I don't entirely know, but I'm entrepreneurial, but not an entrepreneur. I don't want to be part of the earliest stage company where there's so much uncertainty that, that can be a very dark and lonely place. But I need to be in an environment where you're stimulated by possibility and constant change. That's why I'm drawn to not just entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurial environments where there's sort of the appetite for affecting change and uncovering new possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. I love that. I've never heard that phrase, entrepreneurial, but not an entrepreneur. I love that mindset, because that's what that is, right? It's really a mindset. I always say, like, I don't have an idea, but if somebody else has one, like, I'd love to execute it. I'll take it to the ground, but I need, but give me the idea. So that's fun. Now, obviously, like, working for different size startups, you've seen it hasn't always been perfect, hasn't always been hasn't been rosy and lovely and everything like you expect. Any like mistakes you've made along the way, or lessons you learned along the way that
so many
that you would have done different?
Yeah, so many. How much time do you have? Mistakes. Well, I make them all the time, but I think I'm getting smarter and wiser. I don't make the same mistakes over and over again too often. I think where I've made mistakes is it's sort of the, what we're talking about with entrepreneurs and founders, and the conflation of self and mission. And so personalizing things too much, you become very attached to what you're doing, very attached to the work, very attached to the mission, taking it personally. So the double-edged sword of being a creative person is sensitivity.
Yeah, for sure.
And it can be a superpower, and it can be a bit of a curse.
Yeah. I'm not a creative CMO. I'm on more of the sort of business side, like number science side of it, but managing a creative team. I think I managed my first creative team at Rackspace about a decade ago. And I had a team of designers and a team of writers. And it was such a great learning for me to just learn about like feedback is different. Processing is different. Like, I sort of make decisions very quickly. So I'm kind of like, okay, here's an idea. You guys good? And I want to move on. And learning, like, managing those, mostly introverted tended to be. A lot of them were like one finally had to come and be like, I'm going to need to sleep on it. Can I? And I'm like, oh, of course. Like, and I had to learn that, like, managing introverts versus extroverts, creatives versus business, or, more the execution oriented, are just different profiles, and process different, and receive feedback different. And it's a different dance for sure.
Yeah, I do best with creatives. Like, and I can speak both languages, but I am more like, I'm an introvert, and I'm more of a creative, and it's much more the generative process of creating something out of nothing. We just had our annual customer event this week in Scottsdale. It was art. It was art. Like, just the whole experience from front to back was beautifully executed by people who cared so much about how this came together, and it really showed. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we're having some challenges right now on getting a rebrand done. And it's some of that, of kind of the balance of like, yes, the art is beautiful. Is it tying back to the purpose and objective? And anyway, all kinds of challenges that we all go through.
Oh, yes.
Switching gears slightly. So marketing's changing fast from, you mentioned you've been at 30 years. I'm about there too. It was a different model back then than it is today, with the evolution of AI and digital and influencer and, all the things that sort of affect it, versus kind of billboards and print ads like I did when I first started. So tell me a little bit about what you're excited about for the future of marketing, and where you think we're going, and like, what's the latest maybe tech or innovation or route to market or anything that you think is going to be the most promising?
Yeah, I love it. So, I'm thinking back to where I started. I remember making slides on foils that went on an overhead projector. So that's like the earliest days of my professional experience, which dates me big time.
Don't we use in high school? Like, you write on the plastic sheet and set it on the projector, like with a Sharpie, erasable Sharpie.
Yeah, I remember shipping them to an investor roadshow because they were, the PowerPoint may have existed at the time, but it was a traditional financial services company. So my career started like pre-web, and it was through that first Bubble 1.0 evolution of e-commerce and all that madness. So and then, digital marketing became a thing with the rise of HubSpot and Eloqua and Marketo. And there's been a lot of shifts in expectations and skill sets. I've tried to keep pace with it, but I've also been self-aware enough to know I'm not going to be excellent at everything. So you have to find that way of, as I said before, kind of filling those gaps around you by building the right teams. Right now it feels like the most significant shift that I've seen in maybe my career. And maybe it's similar to the transition to the internet age. It feels even more consequential for some reason that I don't have the words to describe yet. But I think that marketers that don't get on board with generative AI and don't understand the profound and fundamental impacts that that's going to have on the profession, both on the audience side and on the practice of marketing, are going to find themselves very vulnerable. So I'm trying to lean into it as much as I can. I'm pretty old, so I know that, I don't know, do this for another 5 years or something. But even in 5 years, I think it's going to fundamentally change this job, right? So we're using generative AI like most companies are right now, experimentally. And I do have a vision for how it can become much more central to how we do our jobs in marketing. And I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be a huge unlock on our productivity and our effectiveness. The thing that worries me more is on the audience side, is how do we reach audiences that are doing all their research in this completely different medium, this completely different way of thinking. What's that going to mean for SEO and SEM? I can't answer those questions, but there's something very big there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think about the AI side of how we work. So for us, we run Demandbase on Demandbase, which is an AI powered platform. And so now, not Gen AI entirely right now. It's a lot of kind of the machine learning and natural language processing and all of that. But the most latest and future roadmaps are all kind of taking those, combining with Gen AI, and actually like the kind of unlocking the magic by the three combined, actually. All that AI is coming through and using it in a way that's helping us find better insights, better intent, better, ways to operate so that we're being more efficient in who we target, and then using Gen AI in ways that, how do we actually execute? And kind of back to the point we talked about earlier on the threat of change. I think it's going to be powerful in a way that doesn't mean we need maybe less marketers. I think we need different skill sets. We need different kind of strategy and planning ahead of it, to your point, to make sure that we're aiming that content to the right audience, that they're finding it in the right place. It's going to be it's an interesting world for sure. And I started my career not quite on projector slides. I do remember those in high school and college though, but I had started it I was at Kraft Foods. And I remember the agency would pitch us these big media plans. We had like massive media budgets, $50 million for Chips Ahoy cookies or whatever. And they would say, we think we should test about 10% of your budget in digital. And we'd all laugh and be like, why would we spend 10% of our budget online? They're like, we could put it on social media. We were like, psh. Like we kind of blew that off. Like no one's using digital. And so we're like, it works much better to do a print ad in InStyle magazine than it would ever work to do a digital ad. But again, times have changed, right?
Certainly have. Yeah.
For sure. Cool. So changing beats totally off of marketing. What's a fun fact? What's one thing that people don't know about you?
I tend to be, I mentioned I'm an introvert, but I'm kind of an open book. So I don't not share. I'm known, like people that know me know a lot about me, and people that know me know that I'm extremely passionate about sailing and the ocean. So that's been a part of my life from the time I was maybe 8 years old. So continues to be a huge passion of mine.
Okay, I'll be honest. I did one summer when I was interning at Kraft Foods in New York over the summer. I decided to get certified as a sailor. So I on the Hudson River. I went to this class every Saturday or whatever. and got certified as a sailor. It is hard work. It is not yachting like in a cute swimsuit and like sunning. It is like that little jib is flying around or whatever that arm is that comes around and hits you if you're not paying attention. Yeah. Boom. Yes, the boom swings around. And then you're constantly kind of tightening up or loosening up the jib. Is that the triangle thing?
The forward sail is the jib, and then the mainsail or mainsail is the one that's aft of that, the bigger sail.
Okay, that's the one. And I just remember being like, this is not a relaxing sport. This is a hard work sport. And I have this sort of like fear of like going out in open water, but I loved it. I love the kind of constant give and take and adjusting to the wind, adjusting to traffic and direction and stuff. That's cool. How did you get involved in it?
I grew up in a sailing town, and my parents were people that loved the water, and I just took to it at a very early age, and it just became a big part of my life. Yeah, it's everything you described. It's active, it's engaged, it's intellectual, it's like engineering problem solving. There's always things to fix and tweak, but it's also in nature, right? You're out in a beautiful, sometimes awful environment and challenging yourself and working through different circumstances and scenarios. And then there's the adventure of like you show up in a new harbor and drop anchor and meet new people and find a nice restaurant and sleep on the boat. I mean, to me, that's just magic. That's the best.
What's the longest sailing trip you've ever been on?
14 days at sea.
Wow, that's amazing. I've been following that lady's story who like was sailing around the world solo.
Over hour.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, so incredible. Well, very cool. Well, that's a fun fact. Thank you for sharing that. If people want to follow you and learn more about you after this podcast, where should they find you?
LinkedIn, I guess.
All right, this is Sorofman, Sorofman.
Yep, one of you.
There you go. So check them out. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.
You too. Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
Awesome. And listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Talk soon.